For many years, there has been a vigorous debate in this country about the safety of the nation's 72 nuclear energy power plants. That debate is likely to be intensified because of what happened early this morning at a nuclear power plant in Pennsylvania.
In the early morning of March 28, 1979, a minor malfunction in the Unit 2 reactor at the 3 Mile Island nuclear power plant triggered a series of responses which over time proved to be a turning point in the growth of the United States nuclear power industry. In the years following the accident, the anti-nuclear movement gained popularity due to the notoriety of the 3 Mile Island accident, otherwise known as TMI. An investigation into the accident not only revealed embarrassing negligence on the part of Metropolitan Edison, the parent company of the plant, but also showed the insufficient preparedness and tendency to cover up deficiencies on the part of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. The accident was a tragedy for the United States nuclear power industry that put an end to the ambitious growth in the number of nuclear power plants. On the other hand, TMI was a triumph for the anti-nuclear movement as it resulted in a new culture of productive public discourse on the best procedures for managing risky new technologies and for the way nuclear energy was regulated and supervised. The accident at 3 Mile Island was due to a series of human and mechanical errors triggered by a malfunction in the water pumps of the TMI Unit 2 reactor. The water pumps served to cool the radioactive fuel in the reactor core, and the failure enabled a loss of coolant that further starved the reactor core of water flow and caused overheating. Eventually, nuclear fuel melted through the container and small amounts of radioactive gases escaped into the surrounding area. About 3 hours after the initial accident, Pennsylvania Governor Dick Thornburgh declared this emergency address after receiving notice of high radiation levels in several areas of the plant, causing chaos and hysteria near the region.
I am advising pregnant women and preschool-aged children to leave the area within a 5-mile radius of the 3 Mile Island facility until further notice.
More than 140,000 people voluntarily left the area within days of the accident. The media played a significant role in the public's heightened sensitivity towards the lurking dangers of nuclear power. In March of 1979, just 12 days before the accident at 3 Mile Island, a thriller film titled The China Syndrome hit theaters, depicting a fictional nuclear reactor meltdown outside of Los Angeles.
The China Syndrome. It's about people who lie, and people faced with the agony of telling the truth.
The film raised unsettling but necessary questions regarding the true safety of nuclear power plants. As the concerns of the general public were ignored, the indifference of the higher-ups in the nuclear power industry foreshadowed a larger problem that proved to be a major cause of the tragic accident. In addition, the government had instilled an inefficient system of oversight and had neglected the nuclear power industry. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission, or the NRC, was established in 1974 to oversee the regulatory aspects in all 103 nuclear power plants within the United States, and consisted of only 5 members. Prior to the accident, there was no systematic method of evaluating former accidents, and no systematic attempt to look for patterns that could serve as a warning of a basic problem. In addition, the preparation for a possible emergency, such as the accident at the Unit 2 reactor, was poorly managed and not strategically thought through. As a consequence of several miscommunications after the accident, the nuclear industry, in particular the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, was extensively reviewed. Just over 2 weeks after the accident, a President's Commission was ordered by President Carter to independently review the NRC and the 3 Mile Island accident. For this review, the President specifically appointed individuals with no bias towards the nuclear power industry.
The Nuclear Regulatory Commission is one of the people who's probably at fault for this accident for not regulating. How are you going to effectively investigate yourself? You ought to have a special counsel. You ought to have somebody outside the agency run the investigation.
The Commission raised several concerns regarding the then current regulatory processes and concluded that there were severe communication deficiencies within the NRC, along with many other inadequate practices. The Commission recommended that major changes would have to be made in order to improve the regulatory bodies, and was convinced that, unless portions of the industry and its regulatory agency were to undergo fundamental changes, they, as a collective body, would over time destroy public confidence and hence be responsible for the elimination of nuclear power as a viable source of energy. Prior to the accident, there was a system of neglect towards the proper operation of the 3 Mile Island nuclear power plant. Metropolitan Edison, the mother company of the nuclear plant, falsified test documents. The grand jury alleged that the management and employees were involved in a pattern of criminal conduct, and the company was sentenced to pay $5.8 million. This failure to report shortcomings was driven by greed, as in doing so, Metropolitan Edison saved upwards of $116 million in tax payments. In spite of this, the company claimed that they had been unaware of the similar occurrences at other nuclear plants, and claimed that they could have prevented the accident at TMI if they had been properly informed by the NRC. Consequently, a court case was filed by Metropolitan Edison. The power company publicly alleged that the TMI accident was the result of several faults by the NRC. Therefore, the Commission and the plant manufacturer were sued by Metropolitan Edison for $23 billion as compensation for their accident losses. As a result of many bureaucratic mistakes, liability for the accident was later assumed by Metropolitan Edison customers, GPU shareholders, and United States taxpayers, all of whom were innocent individuals. When news regarding these shortcomings surfaced, many citizens were outraged.
What we have to do is to call for an end to the nuclear age in its entirety.
Immediately after the accident, many anti-nuclear activist groups used 3 Mile Island to strengthen their argument. Within weeks of the accident, hundreds of anti-nuclear protests took place across the country and continued years later, as groups regularly gathered to protest the reopening of the TMI reactors. As many experts are still unsure about the future of the nuclear power industry to this day, groups continue to fight against its expansion. In addition to the growth of the anti-nuclear movement, the accident at 3 Mile Island has also significantly contributed towards present reservations against the United States nuclear power industry. At an estimated $6.9 billion, 3 Mile Island stands as the most expensive nuclear cleanup project in the United States to this day. Furthermore, required design changes prompted longer construction times and higher costs for new nuclear power plants. This led to a lack of profitability that fueled resistance towards the operation of current nuclear plants and discouraged the construction of new nuclear reactors. 3 Mile Island increased the awareness of the public and the government towards the risks of nuclear energy. Though the ensuing protests led to the discontinuation of the reactor, the accident stimulated the implementation of an improved system of governmental supervision.
In response to 3 Mile Island, the government and the nation actually reacted. They reacted with a brand new regulatory system with much more heightened control of risk within the industry.
However, these improvements came late and could not compensate for the enormous opportunity costs that were ultimately shouldered by the American taxpayers. Studying the accident provides a blueprint for the improved management of industries that are associated with low probability but extremely high impact risks.
The regulations themselves hadn't caught up to the risks of the technology. It needs some self-policing organization within industry itself. So industry has an internal incentive to get it right. I think you need both a private sector oversight and you need governmental oversight.
The TMI accident highlights that a lack of sufficient funds, oversight, and interdisciplinary know-how may ultimately result in the collapse of an industry that once promised a cleaner, brighter future.